Hi, it's Grandma Karen. You know a lot about your machine now. In our next lesson, we will put thread on the bobbin, which is called winding the bobbin. But first we need to learn about a word you will hear me say often. The word is tension. Tension means tightness. When someone has a tension headache, it means they're feeling tightness in their neck or on their face or head. In sewing, tension is how tight the thread is while it goes through the sewing machine. There must be the same amount of tightness the whole time you are sewing. If not, the stitches won't form correctly. Your machine controls the tension on the top thread and controls the tension on the bobbin thread. The simple definition of thread tension is tightness of the thread. We will look at the dial that controls how tight the tension is on your machine at the end of the lesson. Let's pretend that this thick, colorful yarn is thread. When I hold the thread this way, it's very loose tension. When I hold it this way, it's good, tight, even tension. There are two tension discs inside your machine. The tension discs are what control the tension on the top thread. Pretend that these two pans are the tension discs. The yarn is the thread, which is laying loosely in the tension discs. When the presser foot is up, these discs are open, so kind of like this. They're just laying in there. If I put the presser foot down, the tension discs close. Now the thread has tension on it. The thread will run smoothly with an even tension or tightness through the machine to the needle. It will form good stitches with the bobbin thread. When the presser foot is up, the discs are open and the thread is loose again. We will experiment with this when we learn to thread the machine later. This is a stitch note. You will see this note in many of the coming lessons. They will help highlight things you should be doing to have smooth, even stitches. This note says the presser foot must be in the up position when threading the top of the machine. You will see the note again when we talk about threading the top of the machine in lesson 8. This is a rough drawing of two stitches. Stitch is another word you will hear a lot. These stitches are what are called straight stitches. The yellow arrow is pointing to one stitch. The blue arrows show you the start and ending of one stitch. In this drawing, you can see that one stitch is formed when the needle takes the thread into the fabric. There is a hook in the bobbin area that forms a loop with the pink top thread and green bobbin thread. The needle comes back up, the feed dog pushes the fabric back, and the needle goes back into the fabric to end the stitch. The next stitch starts in the same hole where the first stitch ends. They share a hole in the fabric. To help you understand good tension, let's look at some examples of good tension and bad tension. This is a straight stitch, a zigzag stitch, and a decorative stitch. A zigzag stitch is what is called a pattern stitch. It's made up of two stitches. The zigzag pattern looks like a line of Z's hooked together. The right stitch is a decorative stitch. It is also a pattern stitch. The stitches go from side to side and form its shape with narrow and wide stitches that are close together. All these stitches have good tension. See how each stitch looks flat and straight? I've used red thread in the top thread and green thread in the bobbin thread. No green bobbin thread is showing on these samples. Sometimes a little dot of green thread will show. That is okay. We usually use the same color of thread in the top and the bottom anyway. I've turned the fabric over for these photos. You can see the green bobbin thread now. The straight stitch and the zigzag stitch look smooth and even and have good tension. You should not be able to see red thread coming to the bobbin side. A tiny dot of red thread is okay. Remember, we're going to be using the same color on the top and the bobbin when we sew. The decorative stitch has some of the red thread coming to the back. This is normal tension for decorative stitches. These two photos are of the red top thread and the green bobbin thread. The red thread on the left looks okay, but the green bobbin doesn't look good on the right. You can see a lot of red thread being pulled to the back of the stitches. These stitches have bad tension. If the top and bottom thread is being pulled to the wrong side of the fabric, it is bad tension. Your tension is bad if you see loops on the top or the bobbin thread, like these three photos. The stitches in the left photo are making the fabric gather. These stitches are pulling the fabric into them. Sometimes we want to make gathers on purpose, but in this sample, it is not good. We are trying to have flat, even, smooth stitches in fabric. The right photo shows stitches that are wobbly, not straight. In this photo on the left, you see a seam with skip stitches. This means that sometimes when the needle goes into the fabric, it doesn't form a stitch. The stitches are different sizes. Sometimes when we're doing a pattern stitch, you have what is called tunneling, like the photo on the right. The fabric is not laying flat. it's being pulled into the zigzag stitches. These are examples of bad stitches. Look at the left photo. We call this a bird's nest or a rat's nest. The bobbin thread has formed a huge mess. This is not good. The right photo shows the start of a seam that got pulled into the needle hole in the stitch plate. These are both bad ways to start a seam. I will show you some ways to prevent these two problems in later videos. You now know what a good stitch should look like. As we go through the lessons, we will talk about how to prevent the bad stitches. Your machine has a tension dial that makes the top thread tension tighter or looser. Let's take a look at this on your sewing machine. The tension or tightness of the thread as it feeds through your machine was set at the factory with a certain thickness of thread and using a certain size needle. Almost all machines have a dial that lets you change the tension that was set at the factory. If you use a very thick thread, the tension discs may be pushing too tightly on the thread. It is different than the factory thread. I will have to loosen the top tension to make room for the thicker thread. I'm not afraid to change the tension. I need to do that when I'm using special threads. But you're a beginner. You should not change the tension. If you feel that there is a problem with the tension, ask your mentor to help. Look in your machine's guidebook or take it to a sewing machine shop for a tune-up. Just like a car, it needs to be tuned up sometimes. This is the thread tension adjustment wheel on the side of the machine. And if I lift this up, you can see right here, there's a little window. And this window shows you the setting that the tension disc is set at. These two photos show tension dials or tension adjustment wheels that look a little different than the machine I just showed you. The yellow arrow points to a mark showing the number that the dial is actually set at. Both these dials also have black lines that show the normal setting. I have found that most machines have a 4 or 5 as the normal setting. This is where you want the tension to be set for most threads. This machine looks a little different with a dial on top of the machine and has a little window that shows where normal is, but it has lines instead of numbers. Many older machines have a tension dial that looks like this. It has a spring in the dial. We will look at it closer when we learn to thread the machine. The left dial has numbers with the highlighted area showing normal tension. The right tension dial is very old. There are no numbers. Your machine may have a tension dial that looks like one of these, or it may look very different. Look in your guidebook for some more specific information. It is best for now to leave the dial set where it is. It is now time for your homework. Show the person helping you that you understand the following. 1. Describe what tension is. 2. What does a good stitch look like? 3. Answer this question. What happens to the thread tension discs when the presser foot is up? 4. What happens when the presser foot is down? 5. Point to the tension adjustment dial or wheel. Point to the mark or number that indicates the normal tension setting. You now know a little more about what tension is. You know that on a good stitch, the top thread and the bobbin thread will have the same even flat look to it. Our next lesson, we will learn how to wind the thread onto the bobbin, and you will learn a little bit about thread. See you next time. And here's a note for the mentor. This lesson was just an introduction to what a good stitch looks like and what the tension actually is. Your student will learn to wind the bobbin in the next video. The following are needed for the lesson: a spool of thread, an empty bobbin, the machine with the cord and foot pedal. Choose one of these from the threads you have or buy one. 50 weight cotton thread or all-purpose polyester thread, we also call that sew-all thread, or a cotton covered polyester thread. Please don't use top stitch thread, carpet thread, buttonhole thread, machine quilting thread. They're too thick. Don't use hand quilting thread. It has a glaze or coating. Don't use rayon, nylon, metallic, elastic, or machine embroidery thread. Serger or overlock thread is too thin. Please don't use that. Be sure the bobbin is the correct type and size for your machine. If you're not sure, search on the following online sites with your brand and model, or visit your local sewing machine store: sewingpartsonline.com, sewingmachinesplus.com. Thank you for helping someone learn to sew.